In the wake of the FBI search of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, the FBI is facing an unprecedented number of threats against its personnel and offices. And then last night, former President Donald Trump said this.
The FBI and the Justice Department have become vicious monsters, controlled by radical left scoundrels, lawyers, and the media who tell them what to do, you people right there, and when to do it. They're trying to silence me, and more importantly, they are trying to silence you, but we will not be silenced, right?
And here to discuss that is former FBI senior intelligence advisor and CNN counterterrorism analyst Phil Mudd and CNN national security analyst Julia Kayyem. Phil, let me get your reaction to what Trump said last night. He said a lot that was irresponsible and dangerous, but that last clip that we played, your thoughts?
Boy, it makes me a little nervous, and in some ways I'm glad to be out. You've got to remember, you're talking about the professional part of this. How do you conduct an investigation when you have a former president vilify the FBI? But at a personal level, remember, people who are in the service have to go down home to a spouse or a girlfriend or a family, including children, and say, we're going into a midterm election cycle where there are election deniers who will listen to the president. And maybe more significantly into a 2024 election cycle when it's conceivable, obviously, that you would have, once again, President Biden versus President Trump. If you have public information, for example, information about your address, your home address, information on social media, and you're an FBI agent, what would you think, Jim? I can tell you, in contrast to the days when I was in the FBI and the CIA, chasing ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and let me close with this, I would be more concerned about going to my home residence today than I was when I was in the papers with stories about chasing Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I don't know how to make it any clearer than that, Jim. You've got to be concerned about personal security.
It's that bad.
Yeah.
And Juliet, it is reminiscent of when the Capitol was being attacked and as rioters were hunting for Vice President Pence at the time. Trump escalated things with a tweet calling out Pence. And then last night, he's calling the current president of the United States an enemy of the state. He's calling FBI agents and Department of Justice officials vicious monsters. Your thoughts?
So I look at what's happening with what I call violent MAGAism. It's not Donald Trump supporters. It isn't even MAGA. It's the sort of the remaining supporters who show up at these rallies that are not in full attendance. We have to remember that. It's hard for Donald Trump to get a large crowd anymore. He does not have the social media presence that he once did. But I think the truth is that this is there's a small part of the supporters who do support violence, or at least seem receptive to it, at least by what Trump is saying. And so I look at this as other violent movements. I don't think we have to view ourselves as without agency in response to it. And in that sense, I think this January 6th committee, as well as Biden's focus on the sort of soul of the nation aspects of his speech the other night, are really a way to provide to Republicans an off-ramp from what Trump has now become, which is essentially someone who goes after the FBI, does not respect the peaceful transition of power, suggests, if not directs, violence. And so in some ways, I think, that you're sort of seeing the counter to what Trump used to do. And I think some of the metrics are pretty good in the sense of viewing this violent ideology as dangerous, of course, is what Phil was saying, but not as growing. And I think that's really important to remember. Violent movements, they either grow or they fizzle. And I think one of the goals of responsible Republicans, you saw Bill Barr and others coming out the other day to push back against the violence. That's what I'm focused on, is really important in making this strain at least not as strong as it could be.
And here's what Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney tweeted today. We can show this. Trump is attacking law enforcement and yet again using language he knows will provoke violence. Only one group of Americans has a chance to diminish this danger: Republicans. If my fellow Republicans fail to step up to stop this, they will share the blame for all that follows. Phil, you worked on radicalization for years. What would be the effect if Republican leaders decided to condemn these lies, these conspiracy theories, this extreme rhetoric? And, you know, Lindsey Graham was saying there's going to be rioting in the streets if Trump is arrested and so on. Wouldn't it be better for folks like him to be trying to tamp down what Donald Trump was doing last night?
Yeah, and let me be clear here and talking about my previous comments, and I'm commenting what Juliet said. I'm not as comfortable or confident as she is, because I think the event is going into the midterm, as I mentioned earlier, in the 2024 election cycle. I think the challenge here is not just a percentage of the electorate that is angry. I think the challenge, and from what I've seen in decades in extremism, is leadership that validates people who believe that violence is okay. So let me cut to the chase on this. What I'm talking about is more and more candidates, and you would have thought this was sort of bizarre 5-6 years ago. More and more candidates will be elected to Congress who say that elections were stolen. Those members will be able to question the FBI. They will have their microphones amplified on places like Twitter because they might be members of Congress. And if you go into an election in 2024 that's tightly contested, they will be able to support those, like the January 6 people who might say that election was stolen. I'm typically a glass half full guy. I'm like a glass 3/4 empty guy right now. More Americans are saying we're robbed and they're angry. I'm not too optimistic, Jim.
Right, and how do you change those minds? Juliet,
Yeah.
I guess, is this a national security issue? Is this something that
Yes.
national security officials should be concerned about?
Oh, absolutely. And the FBI has clearly stated that both the sort of the violent stream of this movement is the most dangerous threat to law enforcement and to the American society and election workers and others. And look, I actually agree with Phil. I don't know how this ends, but I know how you fight it, right? I mean, in other words, and I think I think what we're starting to see, I really believe, starting with the January 6th committee, with their focus on sort of the off-ramping of many Republicans from this movement, and then continuing with President Biden sort of trying to reach out and say, look, you know, there's the GOP, and then there's this element that's aligning itself against FBI agents, against the rule of law, against the peaceful transition of power, and that's not you. I mean, essentially, they said that's not you. Whether it works or not, I don't know. I too do not know how this ends. But to the extent you're focused on sort of violence as being an extension of politics, which is what Trump is clearly delivering now, there is a way to counter that, and it begins with, of course, Republicans, but it begins with people not voting for it. And I think that's the case that Liz Cheney is clearly making.
All right, Phil Mott, Julia Kayyem, thanks very much. Some sober thoughts from
Thank
both
you.
of you this evening on this Labor Day weekend, but we appreciate it. Thank you so much.